house. I have them all in my car. Like, how fabulous is this to have them all to myself right now? And so that's what I love about car trips, you know, and telling you. Hello, welcome back to Single Mom on a Farm. I've had a request to do a video on travel strategies with little kids. And since it's spring break time and then it's gonna be summer vacation time, I thought now's the perfect time to talk about travel. Bear with me about the wind. As soon as I sat down and started this, it got a little breezy, but I'm hoping it's okay because I'm all settled here and ready to go, and I got the kids settled. So hopefully it works out okay. Our first trip that we took as a family was like an airplane ride from Texas to California, and we had two little babies. Kylie was like 1.5, and Madeline was about 4 or 5 months old. And we had two. They're both lap babies since they're both free, and we couldn't sit by each other because there weren't enough oxygen masks. So Nathan sat in front of me, and I sat behind him, and we're both in the middle seats. And a lot of times I held both kids because they're both pretty clingy. But this one particular moment, I remember Nathan had Kylie, and she had been whining and fussing a while, but I was nursing McKenna right behind him. And all of a sudden, I heard her crying and crying, and he just said, "Kylie wants you," and just went like this to like pass her to me over the seat. Is what he did. He was just always passing a kid to me if we switched. And she was up in front of me and just threw up all down the back of the seat right in front of me. And here I am nursing the baby, and everyone sees it because he's holding her up so high, and everyone was like, "Ew!" You know, like the whole airplane just kind of gasped and "Ew!" You know, and you just hear the throw up. So that was not a great moment of a first flight with little kids, but those things happen on flights. So, and the first road trip we took was the following November. That was a summer trip. We decided on Tuesday night before Thanksgiving, we didn't have any place to go for Thanksgiving. And we didn't have an oven, so we couldn't cook our own turkey or make much. And so we were sitting there Tuesday night thinking, we don't have no plans for Thanksgiving. My family's all getting together. All my siblings are going home in California, Northern California. And I was just feeling kind of homesick and really wishing we could go. And so Nathan just said, let's just go. If we left right now, we could drive all day. It's a 30 or 32-hour drive. We could drive and get there by Thursday morning around 7 in the morning. We could make it by Thanksgiving. So this is 11 o'clock at night. We decided, let's do it. We packed up really quick. I think we left like around 1 in the morning. Drove all night, all the next day, Wednesday, and all night Wednesday night. And we did. We arrived Thursday morning at 7 a.m. Knocked on my parents' door, and all my siblings were there. And it was a fun surprise. We surprised them for Thanksgiving. And it was great. In the car, it was kind of a moment of desperation because we could not stop. That the girls had to be super good. We had a little 4-door and 4 seat belts. What was it? It was a 92 Geo Metro, and it had just the 2 seat belts in the back close together. So like Kylie faced forward if the seats are going that way, and Madeline, I hope I get their names right in the stories. Madeline was facing in a rear-facing car seat. And so they're really close together. And so they were able to just talk and play together a lot. And so that really helped them be good. And I wish I could sit by them and like read them stories and take care of them. But I think it was kind of a blessing for a first road trip that I had to sit in the front, or I was driving a lot of the time and Nathan was sleeping. We just took turns driving the whole time, and we never like stopped besides gas and to hurry and nurse the baby and just keep on going. Because we had to make it in 32 hours or we'd miss Thanksgiving dinner. So I think it was good that I learned that first time how good kids can be in the car when they're just left to themselves, because they entertained each other a lot. Kylie learned how to just like pick up books and toys and goldfish and fruit snacks and stuff and hand them to Madeline and sort of take care of her. And it was a blessing of a trip. We made it pretty quickly in the right amount of time, and everything went well. And that was kind of our best car trip ever, actually. And it won a lot of good points with my family. And ever after, I think they just really appreciated that he was willing to drive all that way and surprise them for Thanksgiving. And that thought meant a lot to them. So it was really worth the trip, and I'm really glad we did it. The other trips after that weren't as good, our road trips. Like the following Thanksgiving, we had 3 little kids. Spencer was about 6 weeks old. He's born in October. And we drove, it was like 17 hours to Florida. I'm sure it took us at least 20. And Nathan was going through a phase where he wouldn't drive because he thought he had to have perfect vision in both eyes, like 20/20, and one of them wasn't good vision. And so all of a sudden he thought, that's against the law, I'm not going to drive anymore. And that was really rough. He went through that for like a year or two. And that was really hard on me. So I had to drive the whole way. I have a 6-week-old baby. I'm exhausted. So the same thing, I don't remember the exact timeline, and it doesn't really matter. But driving straight through, 20 hours straight, through the nights. And then when, and stopping to nurse the baby all the time in the back seat, not being able to help the kids. Then when we got there, I remember he slept 12 hours straight. Like he went to bed at 10 and got up at 10 the next morning. And here I am still up at night with a baby and all during the day taking care of these 2 little kids, and had a lot of resentment towards him. I was very young, 24 years old, 3 little kids. I would handle things differently now that I'm a little bit older, more wise and mature, I hope. But I had a lot of resentment towards him on that trip. And subsequent trips, he stopped all the time to like try to teach people about the gospel, try to be a good missionary, which I value that. And so I wanted to support him in that. He helped almost every car broken down person that we saw. He's always trying to stop and help people. But meanwhile, I'm thinking, we got this 17, 20-hour car drive. Let's go. Kids are crying. We got to keep going while they're asleep. If they're asleep, you do not stop. Don't stop the car. They'll wake up. And it made so much extra burden on me that I was always kind of resentful of him on trips. So after that, I just decided to go by myself. So I pretty much traveled by myself after about 2004. So the first flight I took, it was 2005, and I had 4 little kids. The oldest had just turned 5. So they're like 5, 3.5, 2, and then Alexis was 5 months old. And we flew to my parents' house in California for Christmas. And I remember on the way back, my mom had taken me up to the counter to help me check in and everything. And we had just driven like an hour and a half to the airport. I think Kylie had thrown up in the car and got car sick. The 2-year-old was a screaming mess. The baby's crying. And so I have her in a car seat, hoping to like get a seat on the airplane for her, because that way she could sleep good and I could like tend to the other kids. It was really hard, to be holding a baby and tending to the other kids, taking them to the bathroom and stuff like that. But anyway, we got to the checkout, the check-in for the baggage and everything. And my mom is like arguing with the lady and very persistent that she'd take me back to the gate because I have my hands full with all these backpacks and diaper bags and the car seat and the 2-year-old and everything. And who knows if, the 3 and 5-year-old are going to follow along. But she just kept on saying, I've got to take her back there. And they're like, no, ma'am, you can't take her back. And she's like, well, I take my elderly mom. She was taking care of her mom, would fly between her and her sister. Like every 6 weeks they swapped her, and they would take her, to the gate and put her on the plane and everything. So like, well, I take my mom all the time. I should be able to help my daughter. And they just argued and argued. And I remember the last thing they're saying was just like, well, is she handicapped? You cannot take her back unless she's handicapped. And my mom's like, well, yes, sort of, look at her. And it just made me laugh, and it kind of eased the tension a little bit. But I was definitely struggling with all them kids. But it was fun. It was a good experience for me to learn to do it by myself. I remember we stopped in Las Vegas, and the kids were like jumping off the seats while I was sitting there nursing the baby. They're jumping off the seats. I'm playing airplane, and they're just like, so I have pictures and videos of them like running around the airport and the casinos, all the casinos, and people are like gambling away, and they're going like this and just playing airplane and running away. And I'm just like hoping they come back, especially that 2-year-old. I was just afraid he'd just take off down somewhere. But God helps you through it. Strangers can help if they're nice, and hopefully they see that you have the need. Anyway, those are some fun memories. And one last thing, I remember trying to go to the bathroom and figuring like, what do you do with this big old baby? And I was like trying to get Kylie to hold her so I can go to the bathroom. And she was like standing outside the stall. Mom, hurry, I'm dropping her. And I'm just like, hurry. I was just afraid she was just going to drop her on the ground. It's a little 5-year-old holding a big, chunky 5-month-old, but good times, right? So after that flight, I figured out that driving is better. it was so much easier and peaceful to be driving in the car, and you don't have to worry about strangers looking at you, making comments. Your kids can throw a fit and let it run its course, without you having to hurry and stop them from crying so fast. So I really loved driving, and I preferred to go by myself, whether it was like a 2.5 hour drive to the zoo, a field trip, hiking, or a long car ride to different places. In 2012, I had 7 kids, and I drove them across the country and back for 2 months, like from North Carolina, where we was living, all the way to California to visit my family. And we hadn't been there since that last trip that I was talking about in 2005. So it had been 7 years, and then drove all the way back. And so that was a fantastic trip. I decided it'd be easier to drive than fly and have to manage all the kids. Plus, we could see so much stuff. I mean, it'd be way educational. And I even figured out it could be a little bit cheaper by driving than flying. So that's what encouraged us to do it, and it was a great trip. Now for some strategies. I don't know if I have any extra tricks or any more tips than you already know. I'm sure you're already doing a great job, but since it was asked of me, I'll tell you the things that I've learned from doing all these road trips. And the number one thing is to keep it simple. So if you don't learn anything else from this video, just remember to keep it simple. So that goes for the snacks and the food, the toys that you're bringing, books, blankets. Just keep it as simple as you can. Entertainment, just less is better. Less is always better. So for snacks, I really like to do like string cheese or beef sticks, something with protein in it to keep their energy up. And I try not to do like so much goldfish and fruit snacks and the food that's just not going to make them feel good. For books, I brought some books out here. So, this is an example of what not to bring, even though I really love these kinds of books. Just easy readers, but it's just one story. And so the kids are going to get really tired of it really fast. And these are also one story. So, and they can read these in an hour. So if you bring these, they're going to run out of books to do. But that's fine. If they want to bring, you can limit them to like 3 or 4 in their backpack. That's perfectly fine. But I try to get them to bring like one book like this. That's actually 5 books in one, so that it will last them a whole trip. Like this is, for long car rides, because we usually pretty much go pretty far. Or nonfiction books are my favorite because you can pick them up in anywhere you want. So this was a book about some thieves or something. I think we found it in a little free library on a trip, actually, and when we're running out of books to read. And so, there's just different stories of different famous people, but it had a lot of good pictures in it. Oh, there's the Mona Lisa. Maybe it's like the person who stole Mona Lisa. So that's cool. So anyway, they can read it out loud to siblings. They could just read 1 or 2 stories out of here. They can read them in any order. So those are kind of cool. For babies, I like to bring also like nonfiction, like these are nursery rhymes, Mother Goose stuff, so that older kids can read it to them and memorize them, and they got a sing-song to it, and it's not just one book about Spot the dog or something like that. For a long time, I used a lot of these kinds of books. These are just pictures, though. But kids love to learn the different kinds of trees and flowers. Like, it's stimulating their brain, and I feel like they're so bored in the car. It's just really fun to learn. So I got these at a yard sale, my oldest. So books like that, and then there's just, I think you get the idea, but one on earthquakes, wolves, airplanes. Here's another like a 4-in-1 book that had a bunch of different animals in it that kids enjoy. There's some DK books, bugs, rainforests, oceans, volcanoes and earthquakes, dangerous creatures. So again, lots to read, and they can pick it up all over the time. So they hop back in the car, even if you only have like an hour between a stop, or you're at a destination, you have like another hour to go to an activity or something like that. Kids can just jump in the car and pick this up and start reading it, and learn it. Like, you can read it over and over again and still never learn everything there is to it. So I like books like that. These are actually books I own, so I can take them on trips, because we have very few books. We mostly get all books from the library, but I do have some books like this that people have given us, or yard sales early on when I first started having kids, so that we can take them on trips and I don't have to worry about library books or if they get lost or whatever. And because they're nonfiction and you can read them over and over again. For toys and stuff, I let my kids bring one backpack with just a few toys in it, and I usually bring Again, like mind games, like Rubik's Cubes that they can just solve over and over again, like really hard ones that'll keep them entertained and that they'll just want to pick up and try again after getting in the car or after putting down their book. The boys always bring cars because you can always just be driving cars on your arms and legs and all around you. And at rest stops or at people's houses, cars are just a simple toy that everybody loves. And nobody's like annoyed with, like noisy toys could be. And dolls for the girls. And I find like strangers love it when kids are playing with dolls or cars. They're just not annoyed when your kids are doing that. If you are on an airplane or train station or grocery store or whatever. So those are the toys. I just let each kid bring one backpack. I usually put like a clipboard in it with some blank paper and some color pencils and then some books and like some Rubik's Cubes or something. And then the dolls or the cars, and just keep it really simple like that. And I might actually do a whole video on that big trip that we took because of how the whole thing of how we did it, because I think that would be like make a really good video for people who are interested in taking their kids cross country and back. Then I have a lot of good tips for that. But for today, I'm going to say, so that was my first tip, right? Is keeping it simple with the backpack and the food. Don't bring blankets and pillows, or try to just pack as lightly as you can. My second tip is to keep a normal schedule. So we usually got up really early in the morning around 6:37 and took off. And one of my tips is putting my kids to bed in the clothes that they're going to wear the next day. This is when I was traveling by myself and just had like 5 or 6, 7 little kids. It made it so much easier than having them get up and get dressed. So I would pack everything in the car the night before, like even the teeth, have them brush their teeth, put on the clothes that they're going to wear the next day, and pack every single thing else in the car. And so in the morning when I woke up, I just had to nurse the baby and then grab all the kids out of their beds and put them straight in their car seats in the car. So it just helped. And I usually just grab the fridge bag out of the fridge, the cold foods that we're going to bring, like the cheese and the apples and grapes and stuff like that. So that made it really simple. And then I try to keep it on the same schedule that we have like at home. So when it's nice to be doing the majority of the traveling in the morning and getting there early, it just makes your day feel so much better than when you start at 10. Like whenever we started the trip, like at 9 or 10 in the morning, it felt like the trip was so long, and that's when the kids were whining, "Are we there yet?" But when I started at first thing in the morning, then we got somewhere by the evening, they were surprised at how fast the trip went. So that was just an awesome trick. I packed cereal bags for them to eat in the car because I feel like the more time they can spend eating is less entertaining, that I have to do in the car. So I would just pack cereal Ziploc bags and they all packed their own the night before actually. We liked like the Cracklin' Oat Bran or oatmeal squares or something. And I know they're kind of bad for their teeth probably and sticky, but this is like the one time, I allowed it. Because they were finger size, you could just pick up one and eat one at a time. Sometimes I allow Kix, but Kix could like spill all over the place. But I just like the finger ones that you can eat plain without milk. And it took them a long time to eat. Just eat one and chew it for a while. So it just killed some time. So we hop in the car and I passed those out later, like at 8 or 8:30, whenever they were, asking for some breakfast, and let them play with it for a while. Maybe even from like 7:30 to 8:30. Just let them eat for an hour. And then we eat lunch at 11. Usually we had our lunch already packed and just some sandwiches for everybody and carrots and apples and stuff already all packed. Then we would make our rest stop or gas station stop after lunch so that everybody could go to the bathroom, wash our hands and faces, nurse the baby, that kind of thing, and then hop back in the car. And then naturally everybody was just like quiet. So usually they just started reading, the babies would fall asleep. And I try to make sure they had that good 2 or 3 hour nap. Like that's really important because if your kids are just napping all through the trip and just getting messed up, like you're stopping right after they fell asleep and they wake up and they're grouchy, they can't go back to sleep, they're screaming in the car. Like I just can't drive with kids screaming in the car. So I made sure, we're all filled up with gas and we've gone to the bathroom before a baby's nap so that they can have that 2 or 3 hour nap. And then I try to keep everyone else quiet and good so that the baby can stay asleep. What else for the schedule? And so then we could have like a snack around 2 or 3, and then we try to get to our person's house by 5 or 6. So I usually just traveled whatever that is, 8 or 9 hours a day. Some trips were longer, like from here to Florida. And when we lived in North Carolina, from here there to Florida was always about 10 hours. And then when we lived in Utah, there to California, and my parents' house was 10 hours. So, like a 10-hour trip. But when we took the multi-day trips, then I would try to just do like 8 or 9 hours. And some days had to be 12. There was a few days we had to drive 12 hours to get through Nevada and places that we didn't want to stop in. But my trick was to get to their house by dinner time so that we could eat a real dinner, like spaghetti, meatballs, and salad and green beans and good food. So I never had to eat out. And that was another tip I was going to mention later on, is like, try not to eat out. One thing is just so messy in the car. I mean, we've only tried it a couple times, and I should try it again now that my kids are big. But it just seems like there's wrappers all over the floor. They were eating a taco and they've dropped it all over the place. It was just harder. So I try to just, make the little sandwiches for lunch or something easy for the little kids, like the string cheeses, and not eat out for dinner, and try to make it to our person's house by dinner time. But you can do whatever you want. That just worked for me, and it saved money and it saved time, because by the time you make a fast food stop, it's another half an hour, out of your day. And I just would prefer homemade food at the house. Okay, so I think that's all about for the schedule. My third tip is to not interfere with the kids. I learned that from that first trip, like I said, when Kylie and Madeline were, their car seats were facing each other, and they just kind of ended up having to help each other and get along, even though, they're like 9 months old and 2 years old. But I was driving, and Nathan would be sleeping, and nobody could help them out. And I realized how much they figured things out by themselves. Kylie would pick up Madeline's toys that she dropped, or her little Puffs baby food and things like that. And they helped each other, and they sang songs to each other. And I could suggest things, but I think if we'd had a spot for me to sit back there, I would have been entertaining them all the time. And I realized hands off is actually really good. And I follow that at church too. Like, I don't bring anything for them to play with at church, and I try not to even talk to them. I try not to say, hey, do you need something to do during church? I just sit down and I start listening and I start singing. And if they need something, they'll come to me. But otherwise, they just learn to sit and listen too, because I'm not pulling out all this kinds of stuff for them to be getting and drawing and everything. So I try to interfere, just go and be excited and start working on my own things if I'm not driving. Now that I have drivers, I really love Thomas driving. He's an awesome driver on my trips. And I can just, start getting things done. My fourth trip, I've already mentioned, was to face car seats next to each other. Some people would scatter their kids around, far away from each other so they don't fight, they don't, do all that. But I found when I put my kids close together, which we've always had to do because we've always had a lot of kids in a small car, then they end up getting along. They end up bonding, figuring things out, hanging out together, talking. So that worked for me, is just having them close together, even the babies close together, and they will entertain each other with the silliest songs. And my kids still have memories of some of the silly songs they made up, especially on that big trip, and they will sing them. And it's really funny that they love doing that. I put the baby right behind me, and now we have a van that has a door on that side. Our very first van didn't. You only had the one sliding door, and I couldn't wait to get one with 2 doors. So I love that now vans all come with 2 doors. So I put the baby right behind me so I can just jump out quickly and grab the baby and nurse the baby. And on our big trip, we call it the big trip, the 2-month trip, then I would have Kylie take the girls into the girls' restroom and Spencer take the boys, even though Kylie was only 11 and Spencer must have been 8. But while I nursed the baby, so we had a system down. So if you get a system down, get the kids involved, that's great. But I have the baby right there, so I could just grab her and tend to her. And then next to the baby, which is behind my seat, next to her, I put I just asked who wants to sit by the baby and take care of the baby. And usually it was Madeline for a long time. She was just super duper patient and silly and fun to take care of, just really helpful with the baby. And then after that, it was Alexis. She just always loved babies. And so she's always been my baby tender and can sit there and be silly with the baby and keep her happy. My 5th suggestion is to have the kids help plan the trip. And this is something I want to do for that whole video if I do a video on our big trip. So for that trip, I had the kids help plan it, and it was 2 months long, and each child had a day. So I kind of made up a schedule and a calendar like this. So I put the name of each child. So it was actually just mostly used the oldest 3 kids because they were 11, 10, and 8. And so I had them, they're the only ones not in car seats. Everybody else was in a car seat. So I let them sit in the front on their day, which this was 13 years ago. So I know now, that's not recommended. Um, but we didn't. But our airbags were turned off for the kid who's sitting on the front seat. So, but don't yell at me for doing that. That's what I did 13 years ago. His oldest three took turns on the front seat, and we had 7 kids in an 8-passenger van. So somebody had to sit in the front seat. And we ran out of seats. So anyway, it worked for us. So they were allowed to pick their day, and they were in charge of. I can't remember all they were in charge of. I'll talk about it in the other video. But I know that they helped plan the route that day before we left the house. So we didn't have a phone. I didn't take any cell phone. I didn't have a cell phone or anything. So we just had paper maps. And so before our trip was when we did a lot of prep. And that's when I took each child aside and said, okay, this is your day. Well, they picked which day they wanted based on which state that they loved and which things that they wanted to see. I remember like Alexis loved Little House on the Prairie. So we were going to stop in South Dakota. Was it Brookings, or was that just where her hotel was? And see a Little House on the Prairie pageant that they did like late at night. So that was going to be her day. And she only got a couple days because she was 6, but she never sat in the front seat. But I know she planned, the person whose day it was planned the dinner, whether we were going to eat out if we were not stopping at someone's house, or if we got to someone's house. But they helped plan the route and the things to see, helped look up how much it would cost for different ages, if we needed anything special to bring or proof, like a national parks pass or whatever like that. So they just helped with that and plan the food. So a couple of the times we were allowed to like stop at Little Caesars and we'd get like the $5 pizza, and that was enough to feed the family. Anyway, it was just really fun. I'll go into more detail on the other video. And they love to help plan the motel. So before we left, they would help pick out a motel on their day, and they love to compare the different prices of motels and where they were off the freeway. So they were in charge of the food and the motel, all the different stops, how much things cost along the way, picking out if we're going to stop at someone's famous's house, how much it would cost per child, if we needed anything like a national parks pass. They were just so much invested when they had all that like responsibility, but with me, of course, and picking it out and mapping where things were, how far away they were from other stops. And if it kind of coordinated with the baby's schedule, which is another story which I'll tell in the other video. But anyway, so I highly recommend that kids help plan the trip as much as possible, and then that child was allowed to sit in the front seat and navigate, because like I said, we only had a big Grand McNally map book, and they had to do all the navigating and help me get there. And it was a great experience. I mean, the whole trip was fabulous. So I think that was number 5, right? So number 6 is entertainment. And my biggest advice, I guess, would just be say no entertainment, because that's what I did all these years. Now that we have entertainment, it's just not as fun. I feel like we're not bonding. There might be kids in the back seat doing something completely different than the kids in the front seat. Anyway, I won't go into that, but I'll just explain our other ones. So we didn't have any phones or any entertainment at all. Like I said, we just keep the toys simple and bring like the cars and the dolls and let them just start playing with those. We did a lot of like the alphabet game that you're playing by looking out the window. What else did we do? We sang a lot of songs. Listen to them on the radio, and I'm sure everyone has playlists nowadays, so you can do that. Memorize poems. That's kind of fun. What other ideas are there? Listen to audiobooks that we get from the library, especially if you're doing it as a family. But then if it's a really, really long trip, it is kind of nice for kids to be able to listen to their own audiobooks. Now that they're older, Caitlin likes to crochet and listen to her own, and I can put a different one on for the younger kids. But our big trip, we didn't have any of that. One of my favorite things to do when it gets dark is to tell them stories. And I love to tell them all the different birth stories, different trip stories, different like throw up stories, stories of how their grandparents met, how, other stories of them walking to school or playing the saxophone, or, embarrassing moments for their grandparents, aunts, uncles, things like that. Times I was teased by my brother, just stories. They just love hearing stories, and it brings such a warm spirit into your car. Especially, like I said, we're traveling at night and there's not much else to do. It's kind of like campfires type of stories. I might tell what my favorite birthday was, or my most memorable Christmas, or a surprise party I threw for a friend or something like that. If you're totally exhausted and worn out, I would just go back to everybody entertaining themselves. Sometimes I'm just like, everyone has to have a half an hour quiet time if kids are fighting. Then to say, just quiet time. You can read or draw on your paper or whatever. Sometimes I'll bring like word search books or like mind puzzle games or whatever. And just do that. Some trips I've even brought school. If it's been like the school year, I'll let them bring one big workbook of school stuff. My 7th strategy is to keep your car clean. So that goes along with packing super light, having each child put their own toys back in their backpack every time they take one out, put it back. Collect all the garbage at every gas station or rest stop. Keep it clean as you can. And that will help the car feel less chaotic, help you when you go to get a baby out, that it's like there's just not everything everywhere. Try to teach each child beforehand, on this trip, everyone, you take your shoes off, you're going to put them in one spot. When you take your stuff out of your backpack, you're going to put it back into the same spot. Keep their own area clean so that when you hop out, you can find your shoes quickly. Things don't fall out of your car. I don't know. I just get really frazzled when things are messy. So that's my 7th tip, is just to keep it really clean. My 8th tip is, like I said, don't eat out if you can help it. And I already talked a little bit about that. My 9th tip I already talked about that also, was to go to bed early and start as early as you can. That just gives you the fresh energy so you're not as tired. It makes the trip go much faster, or feel faster when you get somewhere and it's still light outside and you still have time to like hang out with the people that you're visiting or at the motel room or something. My 10th and final tip is to have fun. Just have fun on this trip. Your kids will see if you're excited, if you're having a good time. Just sing while you're driving, listen to your own audiobook or podcast if you need to, and say, everyone have your own personal time. Listen to something that fulfills you, satisfies you and makes you in a good mood if you need to do that. You don't have to cater to your kids and listen to Mary Had a Little Lamb the whole entire trip. You can put on something that you like to listen to. Be comfortable in your clothes, eat snacks that make you feel good. Just be cheerful. Just have a great time and enjoy it. Sometimes I just love being trapped in the car because I'm like, I got these kids all to myself, They're not talking to their friends. They're not at sports or play practice or other things. They're not spread all around the house. I have them all in my car. Like, how fabulous is this to have them all to myself right now? And so that's what I love about car trips, and telling the stories. Sometimes I just want to talk one-on-one with the person who's sitting in the front seat or right behind me and ask them, what was your favorite birthday? What do you want for Christmas next year? What's your favorite activity right now? What's your favorite book that you're reading right now? Have that time, because you don't get it at home very often. Kids are just running here and there all the time in today's busy world. So enjoy it. Be happy, and they will feel your happiness also, and they'll thrive off of that. Even babies can sense when you're stressed out, you're anxious, you're trying to get there, you're upset that you're getting lost, and try to make it an adventure. If you get lost, I'm just like, you know what? Hey, we're lost. This is going to be funny. Oh, one other thing about the child that gets to pick their day and was sitting in the front seat, they had to write a trip journal about what they did that day and what the trip schedule was for that day, and I still have it. So I'm going to show that in the other video about our big trip. But it's so cute to see their handwriting now and say, we'd get up and it would say the time. We left at 7:40, the baby spit up this time, or we had to stop for this. They counted how much roadkill we saw, how much other things, that they just felt like keeping track of. I can't remember some of them right now. I'll share it in the other video. But it's really fun to see the schedule, what time we got there, what we ate for lunch, the funny things people said, what they called, the 2-year-old might call something that they saw out the window a funny word. So those are fun. I can't remember why I just thought of that, but cherish these memories. Make it super fun. Keep a record of it, and you'll go back and appreciate these times while your kids are little, taking a trip. I hope you take a lot of trips, like the spring, summer, anytime you can, even if it's just a day trip. Enjoy it. Put your phone aside. Pretend like you don't even have one if you want. Like, if I went through all those years, all those trips without a phone. I didn't get a cell phone until 2018 when my baby was 1 year old. So I did all those trips, things with just, regular camera. Take lots of pictures, but it's so nice not to have distractions of people texting, calling. It was just me and the kids in the car. So if you want to go back to that, do that. Use the paper maps. Have a great time with your family. You're an awesome mom. Keep it up, and write me about your adventures. I want to hear about them. Thanks so much. And I'll also be making a a blog post with at least these 10, probably more, different strategies of travel with kids, any more that I think of. And I'll put it on the blog for you. You can maybe print it off or at least jot the ones down that you want to remember that will help you. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.